Please take your seats. Okay, everyone, welcome back. During the next 60 minutes, we're gonna go through the 6 scientific working groups, starting with the scientific working group on data protocols, then evaluation and diagnostics, then SWG on scenarios for climate-related financial analysis, then on scenarios, and finally on national scenarios. The idea here is to have 5-minute presentations for each SWG, and then 5 minutes questions. The first SWG is on data protocols, and I'd like to invite Jessica to join us here. Jessica, welcome.
Do we have the slides up? Okay. Oh, that's the slides already. Perfect. No. Here we go. All right. Yeah. So we had a great discussion on the mainly focusing on the common reporting template. I guess most of you know that we've started developing a common reporting template, I think at the IMC 2 years ago, with the aim of having one common resource that we will use for all projects. So we're not constantly changing variable names and everybody is involved, and we sort of have this one resource together. And now this actually picked up some speed. So it's starting to being used in several projects, one of them being Scenario MIP. So I think that really gave it a boost over the last year to really develop this common reporting template. We're still not quite where we would like to be, so we will need to make some further improvements, especially in light of the AS7 database. It's probably going to open up next year or next year. And maybe to remind everyone again that the structure we have with the different subtemplates for the different areas like transportation, buildings, emissions, and they all have different tiers. So that really enables a tailored template. So if you want to pull a template, you don't necessarily have to go through 10,000s of variables, but you can filter for the different tiers, for the different subtemplate. If you want to have a template that's focused on transportation, you would take tier 3 of all the transportation variables and just tier 1 of all the others, for example. So that's really the idea, to enable a tailored scenario template. What we would like to do in the future is to add an additional column in the template that has the name of the subtemplate that would make it easier to filter for the different tiers. So that's an idea that came up that we would like to pursue in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. And then what came up also during the discussion is that we don't really have variables on adaptation and damages. So that's something that we'll also discuss in the coming months, where to add those, if they should be included in macroeconomy or in techno-economics, because it might relate to investment variables. So that's something that will come up. Also, what we've discussed quite a bit is that since this is picking up some speed, we've probably reached a point now where more communication and coordination is necessary. So we need to think of a structured process for adding new variables. That should definitely involve informing the subgroup leads as early as possible before doing a pull request, so that we can avoid double work and that we can involve everybody who would like to get involved, and also notify affected other subgroups as early as possible. That especially relates to the SDGs, because the SDG variables are really related to many other fields. So that's something we should keep in mind. Also, what we also discussed is that it would be good to have a small group of people that is able to approve all of the pull requests, simply because it's good if there are some people who have the overview and are aware of everything that's going on, but it shouldn't be just one person, because that would create a bottleneck. We also discussed that we probably need a resource where a place where we can collect more resources. And we thought that GitHub projects could be the place to go to, because it's already on GitHub. And with GitHub projects, we might have a resource where we can, for example, collect email lists of the different subgroups, where we maybe can also add documentation, because I think it would be really good if we would start to document the structures, especially for things that are more complex. why we make the decisions they are, what the logic is behind the structure. So that could be something that we could use. And another point was that we would like to have more frequent meetings, not just annually at the IMC, but at least biannually, to have another online meeting in May to really keep us up to date what's going on in all the different subgroups. We also discussed a number of progress, a lot of progress on all of the individual subgroups. I will not go through all of that. It was really a long list. Maybe just two most important things is that Anastasis is taking on the lead of the transportation subgroup, which was vacant for the last 2 years, so that's really great. And if you're interested in macroeconomy, they would also be happy to have additional members because they're just very few. In general, if you're interested, if anybody else in your team is interested, please let us know. It would be great to involve really a number of people from different institutes and different modeling teams. Just for the next steps, I will send the slides from the session to have everybody informed. Volker and me will organize the meeting in May.
Jessica?
Yeah, just the last 2 points. We will discuss that we will include this additional sub-column with the name of the template, and we will explore the use of GitHub projects. That's it.
Jessica, thank you very much. We have 5 minutes for questions from the audience, so please raise your hands in case you have any question. Yes, here, Bas.
Yeah, no, great to see that Anastasis actually picks up the transport sector, because that's extremely needed. Let me repeat my pitch here for a 3rd time this conference, that all of the transport specialists from all of the IM teams deeply need to engage then with Anastasis to come up with a good template. And if you work on transport, engage with this.
Yes, thanks, Bas. I can only second that because leading the group means coordination. It doesn't mean he will do all the work. The transport specialists will have to do the work. So yes, if you're a transport specialist, please join the group.
Thank you. Any further questions from the audience? Well, if not, let's save some time here. Thank you very much. Let me invite now Elmar to talk about the SWG on evaluation and diagnostics. Thank you, Elmar.
Yeah, it's a complex topic, diagnostics. Right. It's actually first another SWG on the slides. It's scenarios for climate-related financial analysis. And just before we go into what we discussed at this meeting, a quick reminder what this scientific working group is about. So the core mission is to facilitate discussion of the potential and use of the IAM scenarios for the finance sector and actors in the finance sector, both for assessing financial risk due to climate change, but also risk due to climate policy. Well, that's the stress testing part of it, but I think we should add here to the mission statement also the use of these scenarios for benchmarking or alignment assessments, which are also relevant for the sector. And the mode is to discuss with among the membership what our experience are, because some of us work with the finance sector. We have projects relating to financial risk and alignment. We are 3 co-chairs. Unfortunately, I'm the only one here at Busio. So there's Jay Edmonds and Yu Shah, who are missed sorely. And we also have a mailing list, like all the SWGs have a mailing list. So that's a call for you. If you are interested in this topic and you would like to be part of this SWG, please send an email to the secretariat so that they put you on the mailing list. If you haven't received an email on this SWG in the last couple of days, you are not on the mailing list. Let's move to the next. I can do this myself. Can I? Yeah, that's the next slide. So I can also see it here. the agenda of the session was to really inform us about what's going on. We had 4 very interesting presentations, one on the UNEP work together with the UNEP Finance Initiative on producing a sector comparison scenario tool using really the scenarios and try to understand what are the trade-offs between sectors, for example, for 1.5-degree alignment. We had a presentation on the NGFS scenario, so that's a major contribution of our community to scenarios for the finance sector. Steve Rose presented on the Smart Targets initiative related to the question of how do we identify or explore questions of alignment. And then Max presented on a work about the debt sustainability of sovereigns, actually a quite sobering picture there. We also wanted to discuss what are key challenges and good practice or success stories in our interaction with the finance sector. And what activities should we pursue in the coming years? So this was a rich and very productive discussion. So coming to success storage, there is a large appetite for this type of scenarios in the finance sector, I think is fair to say. The NGFS scenarios are a good example. They are taken up very widely and have quite some visibility. We have 2 users and 2 sets of users, and I think it's becoming clearer what actually the applications are here. Stress testing is one, target alignment benchmarking is the other. And when it comes to users, they're the regulators. They have a different set of interests than the financial institutions, but both are relevant for us. In terms of challenges, I've grouped this in 3 blocks. One is accessibility. So that's a huge challenge. Scenarios are very hard to understand if you're not a scenario expert, and it's often very difficult to understand what they're telling you and what they're not telling you. And there's a risk of misinterpretation. So users need to be able to contextualize scenarios. Users need to be able to access key underlying assumptions. And it's often, even though the community is doing large efforts to get this meta information and input assumptions out, there's often a great lack of this information, and also to facilitate user capacity to understand climate change research, the dynamics of pathways. If a user has a basic understanding of that, it will be easier for her to really understand the scenarios. Salience, national circumstances are not well reflected in the global scenarios, so this might be a call to bring in more of the national scenario work. And then also the variables that we provide. Often they're looking for indicators that we're not providing well or only with only a few models. A key topic of our discussion was the question of economic damages of climate change. So there's large uncertainty about it. There's structural modeling, there's econometric estimates, and there was a clear sense more research is needed here to really also inform the finance world. Last slide is on the activities for the next year that we discussed. First one is we thought we were ambitious, right? So usually the scientific working groups just meet for the meeting, but we thought maybe we can pool our stakeholder connections and experience to organize a virtual workshop with users from the finance sector. We had initial expressions of interest for a program committee. If you are interested to join that program committee, shoot us an email. We want to meet once again in this round in Q2 26. Yes, and when the scenario, the NGFS 6 scenarios are published, sometimes in fall next year, we thought it might be interesting to relate them to the latest scenario map scenarios, and that might be a topic for discussion at the next IMC meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Elmar. We have time for a few questions. Please raise your hand in case you want to make one. Yes, please. Mike is coming.
Just out of curiosity, are there any users that are producers?
That's a very good question. So if you look at the central banks, for example, they do have, of course, research units, but they are more in the business of producing a short-term macro financial projections where they look at inflationary pressure and so on. I think here the question will be of how to connect these frameworks. So because they are not doing of course, the long-term transition modeling that we do, but they are modelers and they also know scenario thinking. So there can also be some very interesting content discussions to be had with them. Also from the side of the damage function, the NGFS, for example, is also looking themselves now into the damage function literature. And if you work with them, it's great to see how these people who are getting in touch with it for a longer period of time, they become really experts, and one can have a very good level of discussion with them.
Thank you, Elmar. Any further questions from the audience? Okay, there is one there.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm interested in the national resolution in the NGFS scenarios. So some of my friends working on actually also modeling, they specifically used NGFS scenario just because they have downscaled national level of results. I'm just interested in whether you will update and do also final resolution of the scenario result assessment in, for example, the next version of NGFS scenarios. And what's the timeline, for example, for the new release of next generation NGFS scenarios? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the timeline for the next release would be sometime November next year, I would say. It's not fixed yet. This year there was no release of new scenarios, so the latest vintage is actually from last year. In terms of downscaling, indeed, we produce country level results for a subset of variables. That's work done by YASA, Fabio Sverra. And the plan is to do this, to continue doing this, because that's important information. And in terms of extending the set of variables for this, I think there are no concrete plans yet, but more on a more strategic level to think how to bring in the national context in these national scenarios, and maybe bring in also some, not in the NGFS context, but maybe in the wider context, informing the financial risk community, to bring in maybe some national modeling, because we do have national teams that are taking the NGFS scenarios and then talking with their own regulators and financial institutions, and maybe there are good ways to connect the NGFS work with national work.
Thank you. Time for one more question. Okay. Elmar, you completely messed up my agenda here, because you were supposed to talk about diagnostics first and then financial analysis. But that's fine, because the problem that I have to try to say diagnostics 4 times now. Okay, but anyway, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, Roberto. So then I continue with the diagnostics now, evaluation and diagnostics, and I have separate slides for those. So probably they are right after this one. Could you click? I can do this. Why I don't? Okay, now. All right. So this is another scientific working group, evaluation and diagnostic. And unfortunately, like for the finance one, I was the only one of the 3 co-chairs who was here. So Jay, again, he was not here, and also Shinichiro could not make it. And therefore, we couldn't have that session of this during this meeting. But we had a very good discussion last year, didn't follow up on this discussion. So we basically said, okay, now we're really going to do it, what we discussed last year. And I want to just bring you the plan. Again, there's the mailing list. Please sign up. It's a really exciting SWG. So right now, what we have here in this SWG is a plan for establishing a community standard diagnostic protocol. And the idea really is to have a few simple diagnostic scenarios that each IAM can run, and then use that diagnostics to better understand model fingerprints. And that could be useful also for individual MIPS, model comparison project. They just do this set of runs before they do their specialized runs to see how the models differ along these runs, which would help them then to analyze their applied scenarios. We have that in the climate community. It's called the DAC, where each climate model is running a 1% increase in CO2 concentration or so, just to understand what the models are doing. So that's the idea here. There have been a few there have been a few studies published on IAM diagnostics. And this is now trying to establish a community standard. Could then later also be linked to the model documentation. We have a model documentation wiki, and if you have information about the fingerprint of the model, then we could add this information to the model documentation. I think it would be very useful. So this is work, by the way, driven by Mark Decker and Matthijs Harmsen from PBL. They're leading this work, and they are also very keen on trying to get this off the ground. So this is a proposal here, which is now we want to publish for your review. I'll come to the timeline on the next slide. And you can see it's very simple. What we have here, the core set of scenarios, are two linear increasing scenarios, linearly increasing carbon price, where it reaches at some point, I think, when is it, 2040, $200 and $400 per ton CO2. And then you have two exponentially increasing carbon price trajectories, which are kind of having some crossover point with the linear one, so that one can also go to a point with the same carbon price, but a different history or so, and one that jumps. And then there might be some, the proposal is to have two optional ones where we do limit some key technologies. So that's all. It should be fairly simple to run. And this is the timeline. So we would like to finalize this draft proposal for the protocol, bring it online beginning of December. There will be 2 months for comments. So really for the entire community to send us comments, how to improve it. We'll finalize it, publish it, and then there would be a call to actually submit scenarios, model runs to it until September or end of August. And then Mark and Matthijs would take it on them to really analyze this, bring it to the next SWG session at the next IMC meeting. And then, of course, write a paper. And the hope is we can bring this then to a level where I say that is a good diagnostic, and we do have a community standard here that we then can advertise. So that's it.
Thank you, Elmar. We have time for a few questions. Please raise your hands. Yes, Saritha.
Hi, thank you, Elmar. I wanted to check if similar exercise can be done for national models, and could we have a similar thing maybe a couple of years from now?
Yeah, we can also talk earlier. I mean, when we wrote, or when we discussed this protocol last year, there was already the discussion, can the national teams adopt it? So that would be important feedback from you and the national teams looking at this protocol, feedback like, oh yeah, that we can do this, it's easy, carbon pricing, or no, there are some specifications that's very problematic for us. But it would be nice if it's actually also useful for national teams.
Any further questions? If not, thank you very much, Elmar. Let me invite Detlef and eventually Keywan to report back on the next SWG on scenarios as well. Detlef.
Thank you. And indeed also on behalf of Keywan. Yeah, so the working group on scenarios has been mostly working on the scenarios that we developed as part of something called Scenario MIP. And these are scenarios that are shared between the different communities of IPCC. And so they are used to ensure that all the different communities that work on climate science can work with the same scenarios, so that the research is connected, but also that we do some kind of relay where we think of scenarios in terms of emissions development in our community. The scenarios are next run by the best climate science models, which then can be used by the people working on impact. And so we had scenarios in a previous round. They were developed around 2015, and they were now getting really outdated in terms of emissions, but also in terms of population, GDP trajectories, but also in the way that we had designed them. And so we had to redo this. And this slide is up just to show you the whole process of activities that we need to do in order to create those scenarios. And there are, in fact, really hundreds of people involved in the last year in this activity, and I guess quite a large number of people in this room as well. And so we have been, first of all, working on a design together with researchers from the climate science community, the impact communities, and the IEM community. We have updated the GDP and population pathways. We already did it last year, but this year there was another slight update, and so that information can be found. What we have done mostly this year is working on the integrated assessment modeling scenarios. And so we started September 2024 with 7 teams that volunteered to elaborate the scenarios in terms of emissions, land use, and things like that. And that activity has been more or less finalized now by the end of the summer. But then the work is not done because integrated assessment modeling teams work with different underlying data sets. And so we still need to ensure that the data is consistent with the data that is used by work group 1, so that that activity is still going on. It's mostly referred to as harmonization. We also run the scenarios in climate emulators, so we check where they are going. And that's exactly where we are now. And that activity will be finished in the coming months so that finally the data can be handed over to the system models. The scenarios that we have created are here. We have a scenario looking into medium emission, medium action, reflecting the current climate policies. We have several scenarios that are tailored towards the area of the Paris Agreement. We have also scenarios that deliberately explore what happens if things don't go as well, if there's a rollback of current climate policies, if choices are made to revive coal, and you get a whole range of scenarios in terms of emissions, but also in terms of temperature. Yeah, we had a discussion about this here in Buzios. I think there were 3 really main outcomes. First of all, as I said, the scenarios will be finalized in the coming months, and we expect papers to be submitted next summer. That also means that by that time we can share easily the data that is associated with that. Second, as soon as possible, we want to involve multiple teams in this exercise. We want other teams possibly also be using these scenarios, which I think will be important for the literature in the coming years. So that means that we will share the protocol, and if needed, maybe also some of the data in terms of the main emission trajectories, so that people can start being involved in this exercise. And then finally, and Bas has presented that earlier, we already also want to prepare ourselves for maybe a more substantial revision of the scenarios. This time we have chosen for the SSPs and to keep more or less the storylines, only to update the population and GDP trajectories, and then work on different emission trajectories. At some point, we might want to rethink the whole scheme. And Iconics is now starting up a process to have those discussions, to see what can be retained, what should be updated, do we update it fully? And that discussion, there are many possibilities to engage in that discussion. And if you want to know more, feel free to contact Bas and Chris. Okay, this is what I wanted to share.
Thank you very much, Detlef. Any questions from the audience? We have time. Elmar.
Yeah, thanks for the summary. I wasn't at the SWG. So, on the timeline, you said finalized in the coming months. Do you have it a bit more specific in the sense of there's the markers and then there's the non-markers? Is it staged?
Yeah, so we have asked all the 7 integrated assessment modeling teams to create as many of the scenarios of these scenarios as they could. That means that we have both scenarios that we have selected as markers, being really representative of each of these trajectories, and non-markers, that is alternative quantifications of these trajectories, but not selected as marker. So what we have been doing is to finalize the markers. We have been now looking very much on these marker scenarios, and that's what we want to finish in the coming maybe 1-2 months. We will want to share the data of 2 scenarios directly with the US system modeling teams. At the same time, we also need to start a discussion on the non-markers, because if we want to publish all this material by summer, we also need the non-marker scenarios in those papers, and because they give an idea of the uncertainty of each of these scenarios. And so we haven't done that yet, but that whole vetting that we have done for the markers, some slightly scaled down process for that we still need to do for the non-markers. And so that also needs to be happening, up to at latest maybe up to February or so, or maybe earlier, but otherwise we can't write the papers. Keywan is already saying no, so he would say this is December, I'm quite sure, but I think that is it will be really really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, this is John.
So you mentioned markers, which triggered an idea in my mind. In the sixth assessment report, there was a lot of different kinds of illustrative scenarios of this sort and the other. This is kind of responding to David Victor's critique of being overwhelmed by a large number of scenarios. Is this process you just described, where you mentioned markers, synced up in any way, or will it be synced up with the writing teams in AR7? As we all know, if you're going to do things like that, the earlier you start, the better. Among other things, you're not accused of doing new research during the IPCC round itself.
Yeah, so the idea is that there are these 7 scenarios that tell a major part of the overall story of possible futures. And so things can go horribly wrong, then we end up in the high scenario. The scenarios have been given this time also easier names. People might remember SSP 8, 585 and things like that. Now we have called them high to low, medium, the medium to low, low to negative, and very low. So with these scenarios, we can tell a good story about all the possible options for climate policy, things going horribly wrong, the impact of current policies, different ways to interpret the Paris Agreement. And so in our view, this is the minimum set that you would need to be able to really explore the full range. Maybe another important remark is that we included three overshoot scenarios in this whole set. So we realized that the debate of an overshoot is a very important one. And so we have a high to low overshoot, a medium to low, and then the low to negative. And so we have at different levels also explore both the political side of overshoot, but at the same time also by using the Earth system models, the physical side of overshoot, because we still don't really know how these physical climate models are going to respond to overshoot.
Thank you, Detlef. We have time for half a question. Bas, half a question, please.
Half an answer as well?
Just a quick response to John. I would be careful to link these directly to the indicative pathways in the assessment report, because these are emission scenarios for the Earth system models that span the range of emission trajectories. They don't cover the full range on mitigation strategies or opportunities, which you actually assess in that chapter in the chapter 3 in the assessment report. And that author team should make their own selection, I think, of what the indicative pathways are. That cannot come from this work.
Thank you. Let's move to the last, not least, reporting. Saritha, about national models.
Okay, thank you. So I would be skipping a lot of slides because I've presented in the plenary session, so it would be advantageous. So hopefully I'll finish before time. So let's see. Yeah, we have 100 teams, and I think we have 51 modeling teams who have submitted data, so we have 100 to 120 scenarios now in the database. And from a paper perspective, we have the first stocktake paper, which would be focusing on the data quality checks, so the scenario data verification, And we have, I think, used the vetting process used by YASA and PIC previously, and then also taking scenario stock take of the emissions, energy, land, and drivers of decarbonization. The second paper would be looking at similarities and differences across countries and across models. So this will be quite an interesting paper to see what would be the policy targets that could be met across teams because of the shares. And hopefully, once the data is published and if the teams are interested, we can participate in the UN GAP report in next year. We could participate in the IPCC AR7 process if we are requested. And obviously, NGFS and Scenario Compass are other places where we can use the National Scenario Database for future analysis. From a standardization perspective, we have a lot of teams coming in. They are now aware of the IMC template, vetting variables. There has been a question if we need to increase the scenario data variables from 180 to 300, 400, depending on the interests. And we have shifted the reference database from EDGAR to PRIMAP for CO2. Obviously, from interlinking national activities, we are trying to hopefully participate in the UNEP CAP report based on teams' interests. And if we are publishing the paper, hopefully publishing it on the Scenario Compass, again, based on teams' interests. From platform sharing best practices, I have been doing a lot of webinars. We have YASA team also doing webinars on how to submit the papers. We'll be having a next set of webinars on the data verification process because that's something the national teams still are not quite aware of. So it would be interesting their way. And from dialogue, so yeah, supporting dialogue. And then archiving, so obviously the scenarios the models are registered on YASA database, the scenarios have been there. From a publication perspective, we have, I think, Nature Series who are interested in maybe original article paper, but energy climate change has come up with special issues. So we will be opening up that call sometime next year, early next year in January or April. So in the next steps, what was discussed was what could be the next round of studies. We could have multiple net zeros or looking at the trajectories of these net zeros, or maybe more policy relevant kind of net zeros. So that could go towards the global stock take, comparison with global models, and then more academic like country level SSPs, because that was again most scenarios, national scenarios submitted in AR6 were closer to the SSP2. So as an academic exercise, we could do SSP 1, 2, 3 at a country level, but that could take more time. When it comes to the special issue, so we are looking at, we are requesting teams to show their interests. So if we have 10 to 15 teams who show interest to basically in publishing their articles, we'll, I think, open up the call. We've also requested like what themes they would be interested in, and I'll quickly show, I think, yeah. So one, okay, wait. I went too fast. I think here, one more thing that we discussed is on the extension. So one was health extension. So we had Wellcome Trust earlier this year getting in touch with us because they wanted to build capacity related to health indicators in national teams, especially in low and middle income countries. So we have had our first workshop earlier on Monday. So, and we'll be having in CMIP, and I thought I would be faster, but so we basically shared a survey with the teams, and the feedback was the extension of database to include macroeconomic indicators, investment indicators, and hopefully adaptation indicators. So that was an interest. We need to encourage a flu modeling teams to register and submit using networks like Fable Consortium. There was also a feedback on the definition and interpretation of the variables that is there in the common definition and how national teams. So that discussion also needs to be there. Feedback in general, maybe looking at investment needs at different discount rates, but that could take more time. Impact of policy instruments in each countries, again, could take time. Involvement of government, I think at this stage we would not want it. And I think, can there be workshops? We will require funding for the same if that is required. And we had about, I think, 25 participants and 50% kind of responded to the survey. So more than 90% are interested to publish in the special issue. The themes, they would want the themes to be around the sickle country, net zero, sectoral studies, and just transitions. That was quite interesting. For the next studies, most teams were interested in a comparison of global and national model of the national scenarios. There's teams interested to participate in the DSPs. There are more maybes. And when a sectoral study, they would be more interested in the power or industry kind of sectoral study. And there was also a suggestion about the use of benchmarks for transport and health. Done. I'm done. I think. Yeah. Yes.
Thanks, Larry. We have time for 1 or 2 questions.
I think we have had a lot of questions.
Elmar, thank you.
Yeah, so GFS, obviously, several times, and there was also the question right before. Can you say a bit about the discussions you had in this context?
So I think for the NGFS, it was more, there were 2 things. One is to have investment related variables. The other was looking if investment needs are submitted, can we look at the variables at various discount rates? And that's something I don't think at this point of time we can do. From an NGFS perspective, it was more like, if the scenarios are ready, how do we participate in the NGFS? Because we do not know the entire cycle. So just to be aware of the process and then see what is the capacity and the capability of the teams and how they can participate accordingly. It was not very detailed discussion. It was just, yeah. Thanks.
Time for 1 more question. Yes, final one. Thank you.
I have one question about the special issues. I guess that's at the moment, maybe like each team or each will try to submit the paper for their own countries. But I wonder whether we have the mechanism just like each team can join together and maybe like compare the natural scenario result from this country with other countries, so we can join the paper together. But,
Yeah. So there is, so basically, if you want to do a multimodal study for your own country, we can do that. So there would be other teams who have submitted scenarios for example, Australia. They would want to join. So yes, that can be done. So we can kind of coordinate that if you're interested to lead that paper. Yes, that can be done. And with the special issue, just to add, there's also, we'll try to have a template made, because what is required sometimes for certain countries, it may be the first time they would be writing a paper. If so, we'll try to have a template prepared, which could give them guidance on how to write the paper and what would be good figures to show for that special issue. So it's more like encouraging the national scenarios and papers, hopefully to have more references for the IPCC AR7 database. So that's the main aim. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Saritha.